Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal for a first. Today I'm joined by Team News and Ticks, who I'm sure you are all well aware of, and you've followed his fantastic stuff on social media and now on his Patreon as well. And this is the first of a new collab that we are going to be putting out each week. And as you can see, we've got a hint of mystery about it, because Team News and Ticks obviously looks remarkably like Raphael out of the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, and that's how it's going to stay. But I can assure you, there's a real person there. Hello, how you doing? You all good?
Yeah, I'm all good. Thanks for having me. And yep, I'm definitely a human. I don't know if you remember that clip that went viral a few years ago. Someone had a cat avatar, and they were saying, "Oh, I can assure you, I'm not a cat." I think it was a court case,
Yeah,
but it kind of made me feel like that.
Well, we'll see how this goes. As I said, this is going to be the first of a collab we're going to do. And let me just explain how it's going to run. We are kind of winging it, as this is the first one. We haven't got into any sort of formula with this at the moment, but we're going to start off by doing kind of what I do on my sort of usual shows. I think we're going to sort of focus this on questions, because we've got loads of them, because I've asked for them. You've asked for them on your Patreon as well, which have come through. So we'll start doing that. And then we're going to sort of stop the usual show, but there's going to be, I don't know, if an after party, shall we say, that's going to go out on your Patreon. So we're going to hold some stuff back that you're going to talk about in that Patreon and put it out. So for everyone who's watching this on my YouTube, you can get down into the description below. You've got the link to Team News and Ticks' Patreon. I do urge you go and sign up to that. It is absolutely well worth it. Fantastic news, breaking stories, everything included in that as well. So you can get our extra part of our show, but you can also get so much more as that. Just give everyone explain what's on your Patreon and what sort of benefits they get to signing up.
Yeah, so it's £5 a month plus whatever patron charge you. I don't think it's that much. I think it might end up £6 a month. I'm not 100%, but it's basically anything I get. So if anyone's seen the Joao Neves stories recently, I was the first person to report that. I had 4 in the first week of having Patreon. I only started it 2.5 weeks ago. I had 4 things that I'd put out there first that broke into the mainstream. I can't Hato or Hatto, however you say it, was one of them. I can't remember the other 2 off the top of my head. So we tend to get things first there. Obviously, not the time for it, but most people be aware I get the Arsenal lineup before anyone else, hence the team news in my name. Injuries, basically most things going on at Arsenal I tend to have access to. And if there's anything I don't have access to, I will react to other people's stories as well. I mean, I've worked within football, I've kind of worked in the media as well. So I have a kind of unique perspective on being involved in all sides of the game. So I'm not saying my opinion's better than anyone else, but I'm probably a bit more qualified to look into a story and try and get to the roots of it rather than taking it all at face value.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's not just that, is it? I think it's sort of around match days, there's going to be events, isn't there? Things like that that people who sign up are going to be able to try and access.
Yeah, so on match days, home games, as long as we can have a 3-hour window before, so we can't do them for early kickoffs. I was actually planning one for Bournemouth, but they moved it to the 12:30 kickoff. We've got a venue within walking distance of the Emirates, and we'll have talks with ex-players and maybe some celebrity fans, obviously about their time either at Arsenal, if they're a player, any stories they've got, or their life as an Arsenal fan for the celebs or well-known fans. There'll obviously be Q&As, chance to win prizes, photos with the guests, but that'll be sort of on a match-by-match basis, depending on when kickoff times are. Because if it's going to be a 3-hour event, we obviously can't do when it's a 12:30 kickoff. We want to finish an hour before to give people time to get to the ground, even though it's only a 10-minute walk. So obviously we can't start at like 8 a.m. But any sort of 5:30 kickoffs or on a Saturday or Sunday 4:30 kickoffs, yeah, I'm going to run events, and the tickets will be sold via Patreon first. And obviously with some of the guests I've got lined up, they will sell out on Patreon. So that if they don't sell out on Patreon, they will then obviously be advertised on Twitter. But with some of the names I've got, some of the big names I've got, I'll be surprised if they make it to Twitter, to be honest.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So it all sounds good. And again, that's why I urge you all, down below in the description, you can find the link to the Patreon site there. And yeah, it is well worth 6 of your English pounds, I would say. Right, we've got loads to talk about today. As you can imagine, the fact that you're on here is just transfer crazy, the questions that have come in. We are now in transfer season as well. So during the actual season, I always feel a bit like, oh, can we talk about transfers? But now, obviously, it's all everyone wants to talk about, and we are slap bang in the middle of it all. So let's get going. Do you want to go first? Because I know you've got plenty on that have been sent in to you. I've got some as well that I'll bring up. But do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is quite a broad one, and obviously it gives us scope to answer it how we want. But the first question I've got is someone from Keen, Kean, and just what are your expectations for the upcoming transfer window? And like, sort of, I'm taking this as broadly, so I'm not going to give individual names as my part of the answer. And I think what's going to be unique here is me and you will probably have quite different perspectives on some things. So in what I'm expecting from the transfer window, I think we hear a lot about floor raisers and ceiling raisers. I think the club are pretty happy of where the ceiling is, but they want to bring the floor up, which means filling out the squad with better quality. And I've been told expect maybe one ceiling raiser, and then the rest to be sort of making the squad stronger, making our alternative options stronger. I'm not sure if what you would expect or what you've heard differs from that at all.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I was talking actually in my show that went out yesterday about a conversation I had recently about what the club is going to do, and it kind of mirrors what you said there. But I was told in that conversation that, don't really expect another Declan Rice type signing. And I mean, that is your classic ceiling raiser, isn't it? I mean, that has raised Arsenal ceiling hugely. But I think it was more in terms of the price tag for Rice. Don't expect another £100 million signing, but you always kind of caveat that with you never know. I mean, a lot of it could depend on how many players move on and that sort of stuff. But I think certainly the message that I've been getting is that they are going to do some pretty significant business this summer. But as you say, it's probably the aim is just to bring up that level of the squad. So it might not be £100 million player, but it might be one, say, £70 million player, and then a few £30 million player, which sounds ridiculous because that's still huge amounts of money. But yeah, my expectation is they're definitely going to improve the squad. They're going to be stronger. I think we'll get four, maybe five new signings potentially if you put the extra goalkeeper in there as well. And then you've got to add Yuri and Timber into that mix, because it's that old cliche of like a new signing, but it is genuinely like a new signing this season. Well, it will be next season, won't it?
Yeah, well, he obviously played less than 90 minutes, so it is like a new signing.
Yeah.
I'm the same. I hate the phrase because it's a thing to use it for anyone. Like, you'll get people that go, I don't know, Jesus missed a large chunk of the season, it's like a new signing. It's not really, you're just throwing the cliche out there. But with Timber, it actually is. And yeah, I would just agree. I think around 4 or 5 to be. I'm not including like young players in this, because we've obviously heard that we're changing our policy around young players because of it being more difficult to sign players from Europe or from abroad, not just Europe. But I'm including sort of players that will be in and around the first team squad. I'm not including a 17-year-old we might sign from wherever, Exeter.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's go on. Robert here has got in touch to the pair of us and says, as it seems unlikely Arsenal will spend massive money like Rice, does this mean that the likes of Isak, Guimaraes, Neves are not actually as much on Arsenal's radar as we thought? Now, just before we answer this, in the separate section that we're going to put out on your Patreon, we're going to talk a fair bit about Bruno, I think, aren't we? So I think we'll probably steer away from that, because we'll talk about Bruno in that section. But Isak especially, what do you know about Arsenal's interest in Alexander Isak, and is it something you expect could potentially happen this summer?
I'm going to answer that question in reverse. I really don't expect it to happen, but I think it all comes from that Arteta is a massive, massive fan, and I think he's one that Arteta sees as if he could get one player, and if we only had to sign one player, it would be Isak. He loves him. He can see so many different roles and how he could evolve us in so many different ways. But Newcastle don't want to lose him. I know they're in the process of trying to get him to sign a new contract. Obviously, I have no insight in how that's going, but I think that's more of a I don't want to say fantasy, because I'm not saying there's 0% chance, but I think it's more of an Arteta fantasy than a someone we're like going after fully at 100%. If there's any opportunity to do it, obviously within budgets and whatnot, then it is something we will look at. But I don't think it's something we're actively pursuing and chasing down from my side of things.
What about Neves? You were talking about Neves earlier on. What's your understanding as it stands on Neves?
Do you know what? It's a weird one because I think we obviously spoke earlier about not going big on one player, and on both the two people we just spoke about, you would have to.
Mm.
I don't like the term market opportunity because I think people manipulate it to make it mean whatever they want. But it seems to me it's a player they highly rate. We know they've scouted him for a long time, and we know Benfica don't want to lose him. But I think it's one of them. If the opportunity arose, they would like to do it. They like the player, but I wouldn't be going out and putting any money on it. And I think that's what it is. I mean, to be honest, it was you were one of the people that told me that Benfica were essentially briefing sort of release clause or nothing.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
But what makes me wonder, and I don't know, this is just me thinking, if someone else activates a release clause, will Arsenal see it as an opportunity too good to miss out on and try and rival them and hope that they can sway the player, as Arteta loves to do? He only wants players that want to play for him. And if he thinks that he can sway the player to choose us over anyone else, it'll be very interesting if someone else activates a release clause.
Yeah. I just look at the money that it would cost to sign him. You know, you're basically a kid. You know, I know he looks fantastic and he really, really does. But the amount of money, if Benfica are true to their word, and certainly what the message I got was it is going to be release clause or nothing if he's going to leave this summer. Yeah, that's a huge amount of money on someone so young coming to a new league when, you know, you've got to try and strengthen your squad in a few other positions as well. I think it would be a massive risk, as exciting as he is now, as much potential as he's got. I kind of look at that one as a major sort of risk territory, given the money it would potentially cost.
Yeah, again, I agree. It was one of them. To be honest, I got told about that in February. I think it was either February or March, and I kind of held on to it because I sort of didn't believe it. Even though I had absolutely no reason to question the person that told me, it just seemed sort of not really doable, and I held on to it, and I put it out there on Patreon. And I think I even said when I put it out as a list of midfielder targets, and I said this one sort of seems a bit crazy to me, but I'm here to report what I've been told, and that's what I was told.
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense, though, doesn't it? He's a classic Arsenal signing. I think he fits the profile that the club will be looking at 100%. You know, he's clearly got so much potential. I think most of the top clubs in Europe will be scouting him. It's definitely going to be interesting. Sort of keep an eye on what happens with him over the next couple of years. Right, you got another one?
Yeah, I mean, a slightly different. It's sort of away from transfers, but contract related. Do you have any new info on Arteta's deal? Surely it will get done. Any indication as to when that will be? Do you think it will be after or before the Euros? And that's from Snorri Anderson with a middle name that I'm not even going to try and pronounce.
You should check me out on my shows when I'm trying to pronounce some of the names. No, I mean, I spoke about Arteta in my caught offside column yesterday, and you know, look, I can't say, I don't know when it's going to be done, but all I can say is that I'm very, very confident that it will be done and that contract will be signed at some point. I hope before the start of the new season. That I would expect before the start of the new season, because you would think any new signing that Arsenal are trying to make this summer will want some, you know, just the certainty of knowing that Arteta is going to be there, because he's such a huge sway, and so many players who sign for Arsenal now will sign because they want to come and play for Mikel Arteta. So if there's any sort of doubt over his long-term future, I think that could affect transfer business. He always goes away. He'll be away right now. I'm pretty sure he will, at his sister's in Spain. It's where he goes at the end of each season with his family. He has a couple of weeks of downtime. And then he comes back and throws himself straight back into it. And I expect when he gets back from that little break that he's going to have, you know, right at the top of the agenda with the club and him, will be sitting down to try and get this sorted very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's pretty similar to what I'm hearing. It's nothing formally has been discussed, as in there's not like contracts being exchanged, but it's both sides of the party expect him to stay, and yeah, hopefully, I hope it will be sorted pretty early in pre-season, or even slightly before pre-season, as in when the players aren't back, but Arteta will be. And it's interesting you say about players coming to play for him. I remember when that report came out from the random Spanish newspaper saying he was leaving, they were suggesting he would go to Barcelona. And then the same day, the Spanish press said that Zubamendi had said his goodbyes because he wanted to play for Arteta at Arsenal. And he'd said his goodbyes, he's off to Arsenal. So those two things can't be. There's no way Arteta's pursuing players, but also at the same time saying, oh yeah, it's really good that I won't be there, but you know, you should go there because it's really good. So I think... He was
furious about that. that report that came out in Spain, he was absolutely fuming, and Arsenal were as well. You know, you don't, a lot of the time you wouldn't get them. You know, as you know, a journalist, when you go to the club, when you see a story like that, you go to who you got at the club and you speak to them, and you're like, "Have you seen this? What's the reaction?" And normally they'll be like, "Oh, we're not commenting on stuff like that. We're not talking." But there was genuine anger that had been put out there like that from all parties, and you could see it.
I think they got an apology, didn't they? I think, because I asked my person, who is very blunt. So I'll say, is this story true? And I don't ask much because I don't want to annoy them all the time with stupid little rumors. But I asked, I said, like, surely it's not true. And usually they'll go like, no, of course it's not, or whatnot. But they actually went into one sort of ripping the publication apart, saying that publication is known for making stuff up. They're sort of pro Barcelona, and it surprised me the in-depth, and it was all really quick as well. Like, I asked and I had a reply within minutes. I think I was the first person to debunk it. Not that anyone else couldn't have, because it was obviously nonsense, but it was like they got back to me rapidly and with full details, rather than just, no, of course it's not, which is like when we link with an obscure transfer target and I ask, it'll be, no, of course not, don't be stupid. But this, it was like all, you could see the anger just in the message.
Yeah, it was one of those. I remember it was just after Xavi had announced he was going, wasn't it? And I remember saying something like, just wait for all the Spanish media or the pro Barcelona media to start now linking Arteta. It's absolutely definitely going to happen. And within about 2 hours that had come out, and you're like, geez, I didn't expect it to happen that quick. But yeah, I'm sure he'll sign his new deal really, really quickly. You know, he's absolutely, we saw at the end of that game, you know, at the weekend on the stadium, the speech he gave, you know, and in the press conference afterwards saying, look, we're going to win it. You know, he's not thinking this job is anywhere near done yet. You know, I'm sure one day he'll go, and he'll, you know, I'm sure he'll end up managing Barcelona or PSG at times in his coaching career. But right now he's very much focused on Arsenal, and they're loving having him in charge. So yeah, I can't imagine there's going to be any issues in getting that contract signed pretty quickly now the season is done, because that's all it was. They just didn't want to focus. He didn't want to focus on contract stuff at the moment, given they're slap bang in the middle of a title race for the last 3 months. So yeah, I'm sure it will happen very, very soon. Actually, talking about contracts, I've got one here from Nostradamus86, who's a regular commenter on my shows, and he's regularly asking about Amorio Cozier-Dubry and his contract. And last time I haven't got anything new on this, and it was just that he's, you know, they're trying to get him to sign a new contract, but there's lots of interest from him elsewhere, and it's unclear what his decision is going to be. I haven't got anything fresh on that. That's still the latest I know on it. I don't know if you've heard anything different.
Not really. I was told in and around Christmas, January, that he actually loves the club and loves being there, but the pathway is an issue, and he probably felt he had to leave in order to go and do stuff in the professional game, or certainly in the time frame he wants. I've not had much update since then on his sort of position at Arsenal. I said it was a difficult one because it was like told that he loved the club and did actually love being there. But I've had people from various clubs message me, or I've seen online. So I've seen Newcastle say, "Oh, we think we've got him." Brighton, they're not as strong in it, saying they think they've got him, but they're like, we're heavily interested. I've actually had someone from Brighton message me probably 10 plus times to ask what's going on with him, because they're chasing him and they want to know. Like, clubs obviously want to know if, you know, he's talking to them and saying, "Oh, we'd sign for you," and then speaking to someone else on the other line saying, "We'll sign for you." And I've literally not got anything on it. But I know Brighton, just by the amount they spoke to me about him, who essentially is a nobody, that I know they're super keen.
Yeah, Newcastle been, like you said, there's been a lot of talk coming out of Newcastle that they think they might have it. I don't know, when you look at the pathway for him, he's still very, very young. You could easily sign a deal for 3 or 4 years, whatever. But I agree, going to go out in the professional game, get a couple of years later. You kind of look at what Amari Hutchinson's doing over the season he's had at Ipswich. Who knows what will happen from at Chelsea if he'll go back there and get anywhere near the first team. But you can still go out and play in a professional game if you sign a new deal. So I think, it's tough. A lot of these players are seeing players move on at a really young age and making it, thinking, I want a bit of that. But I do want.
We've also not got the history of the loans like that. I mean, obviously look at Jack, but we're going back 15 years or whatever it was. Emil arguably is the only one that's gone out on loan and come back and made it, or even had a decent sale. Off the top of my head, I probably am forgetting someone. And even with the way it's panned out with Emil, and I know you're as big a fan of him as I am, but it's still become like he came back and then he was a big part of the squad for 18 months, and then ever since, be it through injuries or not being liked, hasn't really not been given the chance, but hasn't really like nailed down his place. So I agree with you on the Amari stuff, but that still hasn't really been seen at Arsenal. I think Amari's going to stay at Ipswich, to be honest, but it hasn't been seen at Arsenal that we've tied someone down, let them go on loan, and either brought them into the first team or gone on to sell them for, quite a decent amount of money. I guess the only argument is Joe Willock, but he'd already been playing first team minutes. It wasn't like a Mario or a Hutchinson where they've been like going from nothing, going from reserve team, under 21 football, whatever you want to call it, to a first team. We've just not really got a history of doing that, and I know it's something the club have been trying to fix.
Yeah, Saliba, I suppose that was one, wasn't it? Saliba.
Yeah, but never. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. Joe Willock, what a loan spell that was at Newcastle. That was unbelievable what he did there. That certainly earned Arsenal a lot of money. Yeah, I mean, I don't know on Mario, so it's the latest I have is just that they're trying to keep him. They want to keep him, but it's very unclear if where he's going to end up. I hope he stays. It'll be interesting because you got Ethan as well, who obviously has signed his new contract, which is good. And I was talking earlier, I was thinking, if Emil does go this summer, and I think he probably will, if he does go, do you need to replace Emil, or can Ethan step up and get that squad place from Emil? Because he can kind of play in the same position as Emil can. And at some point, if you're keeping these young players, you've got to start dipping them into the first team, don't you? And if you sign a player to replace Emil in the squad, then suddenly that's going in front of Ethan in it. So I'd be quite interested to see what the sort of plan and the pathway is for Ethan.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I said, I listened to your daily update earlier, and I heard what you said on Ethan, and I'm not sure about his position wise, because we've seen him play up to, not for the first team, but we've seen him play up top or sort of more as a false nine. We've seen him as a 10. We've seen him wide right, and obviously Emil's played on the other side. He's either played left 8 or on the left wing. To be honest, personally, I think we've misprofiled Smith Rowe. I don't think he's a left 8. I think we should have left him at left wing, where he's shown for us in his sort of year and a half in the team. I think he gives you that threat in behind because he can run, but he's also very good with his ball to feet. His finishing's good. He arrives late in the box well, which, I mean, there's a lot of qualities that could suit a left 8, but I just don't see it there for him. And I've always said it, that if he's not going to get minutes as a left winger, which even at times this season we've had loads of players out, he's still not used in there. I can't see where he fits into this squad.
No. Do you think he goes this summer?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's probably the best for all parties, and I say this as probably the biggest Emil Smith Rowe fan going, but I can't see a route to, not even like, if you're looking at a player that wants to start every game, I can't see a route into him where he starts 25 games. I can't put a position on it. I can't make any case for it.
No, I agree. I think the time is right for him to go. It's going to be a huge shame, and I don't want it to happen, but I feel like, it's kind of got to happen this summer for him, really. And what's the point of him sticking around? It's just wasting. He's wasted last couple of years of his career. I know he's had a few injuries, but it's not like he's been out and sidelined for injuries loads in the last couple of years. He's been fit the majority of both seasons. He's just not played. And so what's the point of having him around? Let him go out and make it somewhere else, because he's good enough to. He's too good to be sitting on the touchline, I think.
And it's very rare a player makes it when they're playing 20 minutes here and there. Like, you need run, you need flow, you need consistency, and he's just not getting anywhere near it.
No, absolutely. Right, you're up. Next one.
Yep. So from Nathan Hippie, are either of you aware Edu has not really tapped into the Brazilian market? In the last few years, we've seen the likes of Vinicius, Rodrigo, Bruno, Paqueta, been big successes in Europe. We've seen it with us, with Martinelli and Gabriel, even though Gabriel came to obviously Europe before he was with us. But wonder why Estevio, I think that's how you say it, who Chelsea have just signed, was not an option. Do you think it's price, culture, age, or anything else? I've not really got much on this, so I'm going to give you the floor.
No, I can't really add anything to it. I'm equally as surprised, though. I have to admit, I expected to see more. Obviously, we brought in Marquinhos. That didn't really work out, did it? And like you said, Gabriel Martinelli came over. But I thought we'd see more of dipping into this market. And I'm surprised. It seems like Chelsea have really sort of started to lead the way over there in terms of the Brazilian market. And they're doing all they can to sort of match Real Madrid, who had basically took the market for themselves previously. So yeah, I don't know if Arsenal just look at it and think we're lagging too far behind in there to be able to really make too much of an impact. But I am surprised, especially after Edu came in. I thought we'd see more of it.
Yeah, when we first came in, we were linked with everyone. Like every Brazilian you never heard. I mean, saying that Danilo Pereira was one probably we were linked with strongest, and obviously he's at Forest. But yeah, he came in, and I think even as fans, we thought, oh, we're just going to be inundated with Brazilians, and we sort of have been, but not in the way we expected.
No, I think Estavo, the guy Chelsea's just signed. I mean, that's all in all, that's about sort of 65 million for a 17-year-old, isn't it? I mean, that's big money, isn't it?
Yeah, I've actually got a bit of a follow-up question, and I don't know the answer to this, which is why I'm asking it. Obviously, they can't sign him till he's 18, so I'm not sure if it's a year or two before he can actually officially join Chelsea.
2025, I think.
Yeah, so it's a year. Do you know how it works on the books? Because obviously, with PSR being a big thing, does the transfer fee start from when he actually joins them in 25, or will it start now because that's when the deal's agreed?
No, it'd be 2025. I think because that's when the contract starts. But that's presumption. I'm not 100% sure on it. But I imagine it would be when the sort of transaction happened. Although the deal's agreed now, I'm sure surely the money would change hands.
Yeah, I would have guessed the same. I didn't know, and I wondered if you had any more insight on it.
No, nothing I can add on that. Yeah, it would be interesting if we do anything more in that market, because so many talented young kids seem to be coming out of Brazil nowadays. All the latest wonder kids coming from over there again, and yeah, you'd think that Edu would sort of have his ear to the ground on it. Right. Here's one from Hard. He says, if you had to pick one position which you think Arsenal will prioritise this summer, which would you pick? Lots of suggestions that we need a striker, but God forbid Saka gets injured next season. We seem short on the wing. So where do you reckon Arsenal should be prioritising or will be prioritising this summer? I think it will be a midfielder, whether it be a 6 or an 8. I think, again, we misprofile the way we play in midfield sometimes, with solely classifying Rice as an 8 and whoever's with him a 6. With Deck's engine, he covers both roles essentially. But I think it will be a midfielder, and it will be who the club prioritise. I mean, with them, the person who asked the question saying that a Saka backup is never going to be the priority. It's never going to be the number one target. I agree, we need one, but I don't think that's going to be first choice priority. There's a strong argument for left wing with the season Martinelli's had, but to be honest, and I was talking to someone about this recently, I think the way we set up, I think that role's a poison chalice. I think you could have absolutely anyone there, and it's a difficult role, because they stay high and wide, well, not even high, but they stay really wide to stretch the pitch out, and obviously that makes the opposition defence stretch out, but then it leaves them quite a long way from goal. It certainly doesn't suit Martinelli's skill sets, but I don't think there's actually too many that it really would suit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still think Gabriel. I think injuries have disrupted his season. We didn't see anywhere near the best of Gabriel Martinelli last season, but I would absolutely not be ready to think that we should be moving him on and bringing in someone else to really push that area. It's interesting, the right wing, we've talked about it before, actually, me and you, haven't we? Like, Pedro Neto is definitely a player that Arsenal like. The injuries, though, have sort of clouded that somewhat, and we know they've moved for Rafinha in the past as well, and that didn't work out. So that it is an area that they have targeted and looked to try and bring players in, but they just haven't managed yet to find that player, or to be able to sort of get the player over the line that they've really targeted in those areas.
Yeah, and I think it's hard because we're with where we are and where we're hoping to be. You're kind of shopping on the top shelf, but they also know they're going to be a backup to Saka. So how do you persuade someone who, in their head, is the best in the world or striving to be the best in the world, that they're going to be a bit part player? I think it's a real difficult balance, and we've seen it with every team throughout the years. I mean, like even City, whatever you think of Doku, they paid 65 million, but he knew he wasn't really going to be first team starter. And it's real hard to get someone of the level you need them to be, but then they also have to accept that they're not going to be playing 38 games.
No, maybe that's where Mikel needs to improve, though, is to just although Saka's clearly first choice, you've got to sort of share the minutes better than we've seen Mikel do it at times, and that's kind of what City have done with Doku, isn't it? Although he's not started all the time, you still brought him in, and he still played loads of minutes to feel like he's still a real key member of the squad. And maybe that's an area that Mikel, well, I think it is an area that Mikel needs to improve on, because there's no way that you can look at the amount of minutes Saka's played over the last couple of seasons and think that that's sustainable. You know, at some point it feels like he will break down. I think we've seen at times this season that he's clearly been breaking down a little bit fitness wise. So, but yeah, I agree. I think forward they're definitely going to bring in a forward. Who that is, don't know yet. Midfielder, like you said, I think will definitely be a priority, and potentially, well, obviously a backup goalkeeper, but potentially a sort of left-sided defender, stroke centre back, stroke left back type player.
Yeah, the reason I went with the centre midfielder as the priority, if you're asking me to choose one, is I think it's possibly anyway, the only one that comes straight into the first team, into our strongest team. Like, it's very unlikely, unless we get any Saka and the opportunity comes up, that we're going to get an attacker. As you said, you're talking about backup to Saka. I don't think any 9 is taking Kai's place at the moment. And then the same with the defence. We look pretty set, and as we said earlier, we're adding Timber to that. Whereas I think a midfielder, a 6 or an 8, you go Martin and Rice's place are guaranteed, and then there's going to be one other, which will be a new guy.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's why it's priority, because it's, as we spoke earlier, ceiling raisers and floor raisers. I think that the midfielder will be the ceiling raiser.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, definitely. You're up.
Yeah. So Aaron Kiru just says, in general, with potential sales, how do teams negotiate with Arsenal? Do the buying club offer a deal to Edu at the start, or does the player's agent and Edu decide on an acceptable selling price, and then the agent goes out and finds clubs that will try to fill it? I mean, neither of them happen. But what's your? I'll be interested, because I've previously worked as an agent, and obviously I know you speak to loads of them. So, what's your opinion on how? I mean, I know it changes every deal, but the majority of transfers, how would you say they start or happen? Or,
well, yeah, like you said, it sort of changes with sort of different deals you do. There'll be some that the club will, like now we've just seen Sammy Lokonga, and basically announced, hasn't he, that he sat down with Arsenal, and Arsenal said, okay, you can go, and you and your agent can try and find a move, and we'll try and find a move as well. So therefore all kind of agreed. So you've got that sort of deal where it just happens, and they're basically given carte blanche to go out and try and find a deal, and then the agent will come back and say, look, I've got this to Arsenal, or a club will go straight to Arsenal on it because it's out there. But then there'll be other ones where, a club doesn't want to sell a player, but for well that the agent and the buying club are talking. You're not allowed to talk to the player itself, but the club will put the feelers out and say, look, we're interested in, the sort of Declan Rice to Arsenal. Arsenal would put the feelers out to the agents and saying that we want to sign Declan. We think he's available this summer, isn't he? And then they'll scope it out, find out if the player's interested. Because the last thing you want to do is put a lot of groundwork into a signing, and or think you're putting a groundwork into a sign and talk to it just directly to the clubs, and then they agree a price, and then you go to the player and he doesn't want to do that deal. I think, look, what example, Liverpool, Moises Caicedo last summer, that was pretty embarrassing what happened to them, wasn't it? Because he wanted Chelsea at that point. Liverpool went and did the bid, and then they Caicedo didn't even want to talk to him really about it. And so, yeah, you sort of put a lot of groundwork behind the scenes to make sure that players interested, be available, and then they'll go to the club. But it changes. It's hard to sort of pigeonhole it as one certain way that clubs do their business, because it's sort of each deal is very, very different.
Yeah, you've sort of touched on it there, and I always put it into 2 different categories. I think if it's a player that the club are happy to get rid of, they'll either make the calls or they'll say to the agent, go and find him a club, as you said. And if it's one that a club don't want to get rid of, but the buying clubs really want, then that's when all the illegal stuff starts happening. Well, let's not say illegal, let's say sidestepping the law. And I tend to put them in 2 categories. And as you said, I was actually trying to think of an example, and the Moises Caicedo one is brilliant. There's nothing more embarrassing, and especially if it's a long, drawn-out transfer saga like the Caicedo one, and then you think the final hurdle, you've won the race essentially, and then you fall before the finish line, and you do it publicly, which is the most embarrassing way to do it.
Yeah, and that wasn't a great look for Liverpool last summer. That wasn't a great look. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Honestly, the murky world of transfers, it's mad behind the scenes. The more you talk to people about it, and the agents, and how things work and operate, and how different clubs operate, it's a crazy world. It's a crazy world. It's exhausting as well. I can't imagine how exhausting it is to, just sort of trying to keep track of it as a journalist. It's tough, but to be like slap bang in the middle of it and having lawyers, clubs, players, everyone sort of calling you left, right, and centre. It must be, you just can't. They can't sleep during the summer. Just can't sleep.
Yeah, I don't know. Sky done a documentary a few years ago, and it focused on a few players. Like Lewis Openda was one of them. Jafik Tanganga. I can't even remember the others. And it was like when, as I said, I'd seen part of different sides of it, but not all at once. And even seeing, and I was watching it getting tired, and I'm like, this is just, this is an hour with me with my feet up watching TV, and you're like, it's all this, especially like, obviously the legal stuff that goes through it. Like I'm sure and people have probably read it by now, that the Timber deal got delayed and the Raya deal both got delayed because the legal teams found some minor issue, probably on page 407, that they've said a transaction for this amount of money is not going to happen with that mistake in the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, as fans, we want to hear, contract signed, player done, he's holding up the shirt, but it goes through so many different departments. I mean, again, like using Rice's announcement as one, Adidas had to film their portion of it because they put a sign-in video out about 10 seconds after Arsenal put a sign-in video out, obviously in collaboration. But it's so easy to think that there's only a couple of parties involved, like buying club, selling club, player, plus jazz agent, if you class them as the same thing. But there is so much more to it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, so much more. Like you said, just the whole sort of commercial side of those deals as well, now that the players have got, like you said, Adidas getting involved, and there's other sort of commercial aspects of it all. It's just a huge, especially for the massive big money signings, it's just a huge operation nowadays.
Yeah, it is a real minefield, and I think sometimes it's better that people don't know all the stuff that goes on, because there's so many boring things that can hold up a deal, but you don't really want to know about them.
Right, I'm just gonna, as we're talking about this now, I had a question. Here we go. I'm gonna find it. It's sort of out of the order that I'd listed them in, but I think this is a good time to answer it. It's this one. It's from Mark. It says, it is often said that team A or B are in pole position to sign a player. What does this actually mean in reality? So often it's said, but nothing materializes. A lot of transfer speculation seems to be just that, speculation. Don't get me wrong, I love it, and it fills the summer months, but sometimes I'm suspicious that some journalists are just making it up, or at least stretching a point beyond credibility. And it's an interesting one, because so many stories, there's so much now in, in social media and everything, and every single sort of part of a transfer is followed from, because really the main things for transfer, isn't it, is interest, bid accepted or rejected, and then signs. But a transfer now on social media is so much more than that. It's tracking players driving from A to B. It's where the medical's taking place. It's certain talks in some hotel and stuff like that. It's just so much more to it. And when you're watching it as a sort of looking at it as a fan, it can be so confusing. You're like, what's going on? Are we signing him or not? Is it agreed or not? Because there's so many different parts of it put out on social media. And it can all change so much. Like we talk about here that you're suspicious journalists are making out. I can assure you, or certainly no journalist that I know that I've ever worked with has ever just made something up and put it on out as a story, because that's your name is on that story. And so there's no one that I know of that would ever have done that or has done that. It just doesn't make any sense. But just because you write a story that so and so is interested in someone, or a bid has been put in for someone, and it doesn't end up happening, it doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that the player went elsewhere, or like you were talking about, how there's so many different stages to a transfer. It can break down like that, can't it? You can be so far down the line, everyone thinking it's going to happen. A player can be in the building, be pictured in a shirt even, and then still the deal doesn't go through. And that doesn't mean the journalist was wrong or has made it up or anything like that. It's just that the deal was broken down at a certain stage. And it's interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because on our sort of extra bit after, we're going to talk about the difference between sort of journalists and ITKs. And as you just said, like journalists will very rarely, the respectable ones, will never just completely make something up. They've heard it from somewhere, whereas an ITK obviously absolutely will, because they're just all for attention. But I've actually got a piece set to go out on Patreon later today about sort of transfers sort of falling through and not the misreporting, but I always think that people don't read them properly. So like the Turkish left back's a great example. There was a random journalist, it might not have been a journalist, it might have been a Twitter account, that basically said it's done pending bid accepted and contract being signed and medical. I'm like, well, where's the done in that? Like you're so far from done. It's unbelievable. But people read the headlines and go from there. They said, oh, he said we're going to sign him. And it's like, yeah, but if you read the story, it was like, I can't remember, and I don't want to get it wrong, but Sam done a piece last week and everyone had taken one thing from it. But then when you actually read the piece, what they were saying, he said he hadn't said at all. Like it wasn't even close. I'm trying to remember what it was. I actually done a piece on it. And it's nothing against him. It's people not reading what's said, really.
Yeah, I think that's the world of Twitter aggregators. It just, and I get it all the time, especially, stuff I say on here that's then suddenly picked up and people sort of take a little bit of what I've said, but then don't add the context to what I've said in the following sentence to it. And obviously no one knows that. Whoever's seeing it on Twitter are only seeing the quote that's been put out by the aggregator without any sort of context around it. And I see it so many times. I'm just like, oh, why have you put that? Or why haven't you done another one explaining what I actually meant and was saying? And it's just, and then it just spreads like wildfire. It's like, oh, he said this. It's like, no, but I didn't, or I didn't say it in that way at all. Just someone's painted it like I have.
I had one the other day where I said, obviously we spoke about it, but the first Haaland goal against Tottenham wasn't, the VAR didn't check it at the time. And I went on to say, but I'm told, obviously there was no evidence for me to see because they didn't check it, but I'm told they checked it after the game and he was actually onside marginally. And someone, obviously now being behind a paywall, I'm just right to be misquoted. And, I understand that. But someone had put, Team News and Ticks confirms that VAR didn't check it and that he was definitely offside. And I was sitting there thinking, I had to go back and listen to it because I'm pretty sure that's not what I said. And then like loads of people replied to him saying that's not what Team News and Ticks said. And the tweeter's reply was, oh no, the first bit is what he said, as in VAR didn't check it. The rest is all my own opinion. I'm like, but do you want to put some separation in there? Because now it just looks like, because then I would get like sort of Man City fans going, oh, you're just bitter. And I'm like, I said he was onside. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, so annoying. It's honestly, it's so annoying. It's like that and them and the aggregators just putting out all your stuff without putting a link to it as well. It's just like, it's like you do all the work, you get a story or an interview, and then suddenly it just gets absolutely plastered all over social media and no links sent to it. But what are you going to do? Right, you're up. You got anything?
Yeah. So Fod Murphy says, do you think we'll have any progression in signings before the Euros? We know how players' values can skyrocket if they have a decent tournament.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is interesting. Sort of turning this to Benjamin Sesko anyway. And I don't know if Arsenal are going to sign Sesko. I know that they are interested in signing Sesko. But did you see the story that Fabrizio put out saying that he will decide before the Euros whether he's staying or leaving? That doesn't necessarily mean any deal will happen before the Euros, but he'll make it known whether he's going to sign this new contract with Leipzig or push to leave in the next couple of weeks. It's ideally, look, you want to get all your deals done, don't you, as early as you possibly can, but it's just impossible in a summer when there's the Euros and the Copa America. It is going to disrupt things. And it's, what is it? What we know is 23rd of May. I think the Euros start on the 14th of July. I'd be surprised if Arsenal have made any signings by that point. Would you?
It's June, not July. I think the finals in July.
June.
Yeah, I don't expect anything. It's with PSR the way it is. I've been saying consistently. I don't expect anything before the 1st of July. Things can be agreed, obviously. It's like Rice, and I remember saying in May when West Ham won the Conference League, I said don't expect anything before July. And people are like, oh, what? It seems so far along. It's like, but the way all the clubs understand it, the way the financial years work now, because they're all fighting the same battles. So we may hear of stuff agreed before then. But if you're looking for a guy standing outside Colney holding a shirt up, I wouldn't expect anything before July. But obviously the question says if they play well, their values can skyrocket. As I said, I wouldn't be surprised if we agree a deal before that. So you kind of counteract the possibility of their value going through the roof.
Yeah.
But as I said, yeah, I'd be pretty confident in saying no one's holding up a shirt in June.
Mm-hmm. Right, it's one from Ben. He says, "Hey Charles and TNAT, love the work. How much of our summer business will rely on outgoings, both financially and in terms of positions?" I thought this was quite an interesting one. Yeah, I think that when we're talking there about actually potential deals being done, outgoings wise, you look at some of the players that Arsenal could look to sell this summer: Eddie, Reece, Emil. None of those.
Ramsdale will be Euros.
Yeah, Ramsdale will be England. But certainly those three, none of those will be sort of caught up with the internationals, but they will be away on holiday for a big chunk of it, certainly these weeks. But yeah, I think it's definitely. It was not going to rely on it. Arsenal are going to spend a fair amount of money this summer, even without outgoings. But on obviously any sort of money you can bring into the club is going to help and potentially get you maybe that one extra sign-in that you might not have been able to get had you not made some fairly significant sales. So I don't think it's going to, it doesn't center around it purely, but it's certainly going to help.
I think I'm probably a bit different to you on it. I think it is quite a big deal, especially with the three you name, because it's all clear profit on the books with PSR. I feel like I'm bored of saying the letters PSR, but it is such a big part of modern transfers. But because all of them book value is zero to us, it's pure profit. And obviously with contracts immortalized over 5 years of anyone we signed, like if you sell someone for 30 million, it's almost like 150 million. So I think they are a big part of it. And also, as the question asked, in terms of the squad, like obviously if you want to sign another 9, then and Eddie's still there, it's just another factor. And also the wages, it means you're paying both people's wages. And if you do that, okay, you might do that with one, but if you're doing that throughout the squad with all of the people you want to sign, then teams end up offering you less for the players because they know you have to get rid. Mm-hmm. So I think it plays a big part. I think all in all, and like don't hold me to this, it's not, I would say it's my opinion, not anything I've been told. I think I'd probably expect us to spend around the same as what we did last summer, give or take in total, probably a little bit less, but I think our incomings will be substantially more.
You would certainly hope they're going to be substantially more. Yeah, just those players you listed, like you said, pure profit on the books for those sort of players. Wait and see what happens with Aaron Ramsdale and Newcastle. 15 million. Did you see that the 15 million for Ramsdale? I can't. I mean, surely that can't be what Arsenal would accept for Aaron Ramsdale. It just would be bonkers, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it is a weird one because I saw it from a random account that sort of no followers, like trying to be either an ITK or journalist, but no one that anyone's ever heard of, and no one else had said it at this point. In all fairness to them, if they end up being right, but they'd said 15 million plus 3 million in add-ons, and I just kind of dismissed it. And then a few hours later, some more sort of reputable press was saying it, and I was thinking, what on earth is going on here? To be honest, I'm not happy with Ramsdale anyway, because when he put out the news to me tweet, it's like, mate, you've been speaking to clubs, everyone knows it. And look, I'm a big Ramsdale fan, so I'm not saying this from a position of, hey, I'll be honest and say I didn't want Raya at the time. I was more than happy with Ramsdale. But I think like stuff like that tweet is just...
I think the news to me, though, that was on it, because the story was suddenly out there that guy said it was all done and dusted, wasn't he? That account was like, it's done.
Yeah, the Sky guy.
15 million plus 3. And it was a Sky guy put out that he'd heard it was absolutely, the deal was done. And so I sort of took the news to me tweet as more the fact that it had been, it was basically finalised rather than interest. Like you said, I mean, the Newcastle stuff's been rumbling on behind the scenes for a while. I think that there is certainly, it's kind of a similar position to what we were with Kieran Tierney this stage last season, where I was absolutely sure that Tierney was going to Newcastle, and then suddenly it didn't happen. So that was another good example of a deal which, from all accounts, from everything that I'd heard, was everyone was expecting it to happen at some point in the summer, then suddenly it just didn't. And I kind of feel like we're in the same boat with Aaron and Newcastle at the moment. So I'm still not going to count the chickens that it will definitely happen, but it's certainly one that's been, the whispers behind the scenes are it's rumbling on.
Did you see Lottie Wubben-Moy gave him the leaving present the day after he tweeted news for me? It didn't really make the press as much as I expected it to, and I know next to nothing about women's football, and I'm more than open to admit that. And I had to research, oh, is she going? Because surely Aaron wouldn't have posted that on his story without anything confirmed, especially after he'd done news to me the day before. But by all accounts, she's staying. There's 0% chance of her going from what people tell me. As I said, I know nothing.
What did she give him?
So she gave him a pair of shoes, a pair of Birkenstocks, but she said, like, to Aaron, it's a shame I'm not going to see you around the training ground anymore. Best of luck. Something I'm paraphrasing, but something along those lines.
No, I didn't see the message. I saw him post a picture of himself with and like thanking her for a present, but I didn't realize it was.
So he put on his Instagram story the box. So she'd written on the box. That's what I just said, give or take, is what she'd written on the box, and he posted that on his Instagram story of him like opening the box. But yeah, it's clearly visible. It's not like you had to decode it.
All right, interesting. Yeah, well, I think it's like, again, I wrote in my quarter side column how it for me it's just a absolute matter of when, not if, that Ramsdale goes. It's just a given that it's going to happen. It just depends to who and for how much. But 15 million, no, that's surely you cannot be accepting that sort of money. I'd rather keep him than do that, because if you're going to sign, and there's talk of this final goalkeeper at the moment that Sam Dean has just reported today. But you're looking at about sort of 10 million pounds for him. If you're selling Ramsdale for 5 million and then you're bringing in his replacement for 10 million, it just doesn't make any sense. You've got to be making big money from Ramsdale, surely.
Well, and it's like we were speaking about the young players earlier with loans, but for 15 million, with the length of contract we have with Rambo, I'd rather him go out on loan, because his value ain't going to fall from 15. It's near impossible for his value to fall with the level of keeper he is. So I'd rather take the chance, even if you get his wages covered, and even in a year's time, if he's only worth 15 million, you've taken the chance rather than just accepting defeat from the off.
I've spoken about that on this show, that it's something that wouldn't surprise me if it does end up, if they don't get any sort of offer that's reasonable, that it wouldn't surprise me at all if he ends up going on loan, given the length of his contract. It makes sense, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right, we're up to 52 minutes on this. So do you want to pick one more, and then we'll move on to the second half of the show, which will be on your Patreon?
Yeah, so Mal Alicia, I think it's pronounced, just says, are you guys aware of any internal talk regarding Marcus Rashford?
No. Well, I had a question about Rashford on my show this morning, actually, someone raising the possibility of us signing him. But no, I haven't heard anything on that. I don't know if you have.
No, I mean, not from the club. But there's so many issues with Rashford. I think fans are linking him because position-wise, it actually fit quite well.
Yeah.
But there's just so many questions. Obviously, his wage being one. Man United have always been the most ridiculous team to deal with. So it's not really known, but it is some of it's known. But they tried to sell Casemiro last summer and thought they would get their money back. Obviously, it didn't happen. They were open. They were open to selling Anthony in January. And wanted 60 million. It's like, how do you deal with a team that just are that unself-aware? And obviously Rashford's got his issue. You would hope that under new stewardship they might be a bit more sensible, but like Man United are just near impossible to deal with. He also has his wages, and there is questions about his extracurricular life, and I don't mean the good side of it in terms of helping kids. I mean the missing games because he was out or missing training because he was out the night before. And I think if you just add all that up, it just doesn't fit.
That would go down like a lead balloon with Mikel Arteta, something like that. You wouldn't last very long at Arsenal if you did that. He went out on the lash and called in sick, and then got videos put up of you on the lash.
And obviously it's the bright lights of London as well, which I'm not saying there isn't a nightlife scene in Manchester, and I think it's actually Ireland he was caught out in, but the law of the nightlife in London is a whole lot more than both of them places, so it also adds to the temptation.
Yeah, somewhere like PSG might work for Rashford, I think. I just think he needs to get out of Manchester, to be honest. Well, saying that, I think he needs a new manager to work with, and I think he probably will have a new manager to work with next season if he stays at Manchester anyway. But yeah, no, I can't see that one being Arsenal for a multitude of reasons. But look, this is 55 minutes for our first show. I think it's gone all right, don't you? If for us winging it, I think it's gone all right, isn't it?
Yeah, it's done well. I mean, obviously, we've got to thank the audience for sending the questions in, because if there wasn't any questions, we would have just been sat here twiddling thumbs for nearly an hour.
Absolutely, and we'll flag next week when we're going to do it. I don't think we're going to sort of set in stone which day we'll do it, but we'll flag it on both of our channels when we're going to do it. So, yeah, again, get in touch with your questions when we do that. Now, right now, we're going to end this show here on my YouTube, but we're going to continue it for a bit on your Patreon. So, as I said at the start, if you want to keep listening, we're going to talk plenty more about transfers and the life of journalists and ITKs and things like that. Then you can listen to it on Patreon, and the link to your Patreon is down in the description below. You can also find it on your Twitter account, can't you, as well? So get onto that. But for now, on YouTube anyway, see you later, everyone. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll speak to you very, very soon. Bye-bye.